My name is Muti. Okay, my name is Muti, preferred gender pronoun she or her, and I'm going to be chairing this run alongside with an amazing set of like my panels to also introduce themselves. The first one we have Kak Angga. Is Kak Angga here? Kak Angga.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Muti. Hi, everyone. My name is Angga. I'll be your panel for this round. Gender pronunciation is he or him. Wish you good luck for the best in this final round.
Thank you, Kak Angga. The next one we have Kak Daud. Are you here?
Hi, I'm here. Hi, everyone. My name is Daud from Ubaya. Prefer pronouns they, them. Good luck for all of the grand finalists.
Next one, we have Chacha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chacha. My pronunciation is she or her. Good luck, everyone.
Next one, Irene.
Hello, everyone. I'm Irene. Gender preferred pronoun she or they. Good luck and have fun.
Thank you. May, are you here?
Hi, I'm May from Unhas. No preferred gender pronouns. Wish best of luck for all novice grand finalists.
And then Kak Anon.
Hey everyone, I'm Anon. No gender preference pronouns. Good luck and hope we have a great debate on our hands.
Tere.
Hi everyone, my name is Dera. I have no gender preferred pronouns. Good luck everyone.
And last but definitely not least, Valen.
Hi everyone, my name is Fadel. Preferred pronouns is they or she. Best of luck for both of these.
Thank you so much for all the panels. I think that few notes before we start the debate. Firstly, I think I'm not going to be able to give like timestamp in the chat box because I'm going to be quite busy with my notes. So please time yourself and please be mindful also with the time limit. And second of all, please also remain equitable, remain respectful, and I hope that this round and this tournament can be an open and also safe tournament for everyone. That's all. Without further ado, to open the case of affirmative, we're calling upon the first speaker of affirmative team. Floor is yours. You're here.
Sorry, am I audible?
Yep.
Thank you. Currently setting my timer first. Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In an ideal world where everyone tried to pursue development and self-actualization, we need to be aware of where our world currently stands for, right? We don't regret the whole premise of development itself, but notice that the current universal perspective that we live in has shifted the all-around position of what it means to have development. So what do we mean by this? Let's take a look at our current status quo and portray how our world looks like, right? So development right now is now the main indicator of or parameter of the basis of living to the point where it becomes toxic. So let's picturize. Now, the development is being based on numbers and statistics, like how many trophies you got, your cumulative GPA, the amount of certificates you have. And getting into like professional world of working, for example, your development is now based on how many annual salary you have and how fast you are being promoted in a young early age in your work. So opposition side of the house needs to defend a world in which first people are being competitive in a toxic way under an unhealthy measure. But secondly, how their side of the house is going to have better views of what is it to be developed as a personal, right? Because we can see that we still have development, but we don't want it as an inherent measure, but instead the portrayal of our world is that we're favoring a personal perspective of the development itself, how you improve yourself based on your own parameter without the unhealthy perspective that is proliferated on societal structure that we currently live in, right? So two arguments I'm going to bring to you in this debate. Firstly, on how this nature, the nature of human being itself is very much contradictory right now towards the universal perspective that we live in. But secondly, also on the effects of behavior, individual level, and how community aggregately look at the current universal perspective itself. So getting to the first argument, firstly, I'm going to establish the case first. So the nature of human being is that we're very prone to failure, and we can do everything exceedingly perfect and like consistently successfully growing because we do have limit in a certain point of our life, right? So the moment when there is a proliferation of views that in order for you to be an inherently working and functioning part of society, you have to consistently push yourself to your limit in order to get the development without taking into account other variables, right? So the moment when you are getting, for example, into debate competition and you just don't win and you don't break into quarterfinals or semi, for example, because of the current views on how you develop yourself, on how it is being based on the truth is and how the statistics itself, you will feel discouraged and thinking that you're not a good debater since the measurement is based on number and communal constructs, right? Meanwhile, when the development itself is being based under your own personal measures, where it is not an inherent system itself, you can always have your own standings. Like it will just focus on the input by your educator, for example, and the experiences that you get from round to round of debating. So this is why, like in principle, the nature of us when we fail is very much contradictory towards the current universal perspective of development as an inherent good, as it doesn't serve the amount of capability that you also have. But on the comparison, right? Under government, we want this development not to be universally perceived, but either individually where one can have self-actualization. So under our side, you do not have to punish yourself when you lose a debate competition, because what matters is how you finally improve your fluency or your own structure and matter knowledge, not necessarily the visible development that everyone can see. But under opposition, this universal perspective will proliferate, and we think the worst case under opposition is as to how you're eventually going to be so desperate just to entertain people's stereotype that you self-blame yourself for not being a debater, for example, for not winning all classics tournament in a year. So this is the toxicity that we do not want our doesn't fulfill and serve the kind of principle that we want, which is the personal development stuff, right? But secondly, let's take a look at the practical level on the effects of individual level first, right? So with the advancement of technology and social media and like emerging capitalism, you're being pushed to be successful in every single field that you're into. So this is exactly why you can see like a lot of high schoolers taking the so-called internship-based social media while undergoing so many stress just to survive at school, not truly looking deeply into what they want and be focused on the kind of success that lies under toxic productivity. So how does this look like? Since we've established to you the characterization of the current world we're living in and the parameter of success that they favor, this looks like an obsession of radically want to improve yourself in an unachievable goal that causes you to set high standards, which in the surface level look good. But the problem here is no matter how productive you might be, there's always a feeling of guilt for not having done more. Why? Because the inherent because of the views that being developed is inherently good. If you slack off a little bit, or if you wanting to just have a little bit of time for you to reflect on yourself, you still have a feeling of guilt for not having done more and fulfilling a lot more productive things that could be seen by the people, right? This is exactly why the effects on individual behavior is a lot more toxic. But let's take a look at the effects on communal level, right? So this is going to influence behavior of each people living in one community. Because this is what happened to structural poverty, for example, where they're being oppressed consistently by constantly by capitalism, and people are trying to appeal those capitalism. So a community where luxury is like the parameter that you have to grow and you have to develop, we said that this is bad because what it's manifest to is as to how the worth of your development is nothing more than this amount of richness itself. So my second speaker are also going to explain to you how development itself can be extremely unproportionate in our current world, and how it also harms the very structural oppressions that we're going in, right? Because we don't want the current views on the universal perspective itself is going to be harmful and where the success is focused in society where hustle culture is very much normalized, and that individuals are baited by this kind of idea of developing their condition, even at the expense of other things like their own mental health and capability to push for more, right? To push for more. This is exactly why the proliferation of this kind of view will make the toxic productivity cycle even bigger and bigger, even bigger and bigger. And this is why we don't want to giving it far too much credit than it deserves, and ignoring the personal development that we instead can actually experience, instead of pushing it forward towards the current view that the people are currently holding. So what we've proven to you, at least in our side of the house, people in our side of the house, where the universal perspective that development is inherent good, people can still focus on their own self-actualization without having to sign into the kind of toxic standard that we currently live in a very toxically competitive world, right? And that is exactly why this is the case that we're very proud to propose.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to open the case of negative theme, we're calling upon leader opposition. Floor is yours. Here.
Okay, I hope I'm audible. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, we too regret the implications of the current views of development, right? But we think that this idea of this hustle culture, this idea of toxic development is precisely because society has a false perception of what development is, right? As the opposition, we will actually explain to you what is development fundamentally and why it's good. And what we want from our side is that we want these people to actually know what development actually is, right? And why it is good and is actually inevitable. The government side of the team is very tunnel vision, right? They try to tell to you about that, oh, what we want on their side, what they want from their side of the case is that they want individual actualization. However, we think this is a very house stance position, right? What they have to prove to you is first, what makes an individual development different from development in general. We think that at the end of the day, development is development. It doesn't matter if it's about it doesn't matter if it's you as a society as a whole or if it's you as an individual. What this debate should actually be about is about whether we should defend development versus stagnancy versus stability. This is what we should talk about, right? But we're still going to respond to you why even if there are harms that exist because of this development in the first place, it's not going to be as bad as the government tried to portray it, right? They tried to give you this idea about hustle culture, competition, and etc. However, we're going to explain to you that firstly, no, we have to look at what development actually is, right? Development is not about the end goal in itself. Development is development as fundamentally is about the process in itself. People don't just go around telling you have to be billionaires. People don't go around telling you have to always succeed, right? What they want you is they want you to explore opportunities that exist in your life and to continuously improve yourself. Like they want you to better yourself. It's even if for example you lose this debate competition and whatnot, society isn't that evil that they would just immediately reject you, right? That this kind of rejection in the side of debate actually comes from ourselves, right? We think that what happens in society is that when they see you have tried, when they see that you have actually put in effort, they appreciate it. They appreciate that you've done your best. They appreciate that even if you didn't win, you've given it your all. And we think that is what development, or at the very least, what the universal perspective of development that exists in our side of debate is actually about, right? But I'm going to explain to you later on about why, even if the harm manifests in the side of the debate, it's not going to be that bad. But firstly, let's talk about what we think this debate is about, right? We think that in this debate, development is inherently a good thing, even when it can lead to bad decisions. Why? Because we think that when we think that people actually are incentivized to develop themselves, they would not be trapped in stagnancy. They would not. They would actually be incentivized to explore opportunities available for them, so that they can mobilize out of their situations. Right? We think this is a good thing in our side of it. So, what is the substantive? Right? Our substantive is pretty simple. Firstly, why status quo is actually not that harmful, and secondly, about why it is actually good that there is this universal perspective of development in the first place. Okay. So, firstly, let's talk about why the harm is not that bad in our side of debate, right? They try to bring about this hustle culture, but understand that again, we already explained to you that the negativity coming from the self-blame and whatnot is already premeditated, is already checked and balanced by society, right? People don't like to see that you feel burnt out, for example. They don't like to see that you blame yourself and whatnot. There are already campaigns, mental health campaigns, for example, that tell you you are worth it despite you are worthy being despite your accomplishment. You are good because you have tried, not because of what the actual end goal is, right? We think that this is in itself is already development, right? Because again, understand that even when this kind of harm happens, there is development, and that development manifests itself in the way that people respond to it. People try to say that it's okay. People try to say that you're not stupid. You're not bad because just of this one failure, for example. But understand then, why is it that this development is actually really good, right? Understand that here is what is the universal truth in our life, right? Changes are inherent. You can always control what happens in life. You cannot control the fact that you're poor. You cannot control the fact that maybe you as a developing country has been exploited and whatnot. But we think that when we cannot change the situation of your life, for example, you cannot change what situation you are born in, for example, development is good because then it incentivizes you to actually put yourself out of the situation. You cannot, maybe you cannot control the world, but you can control your actions, right? And we think at the end of the day, it's gonna be good because when you try to succeed, for example, when you're poor and you are poor and you want to get out of poverty, when you are urged by society to go to college, for example, this is good because then you actually go through the mobilization, you go through you actually face the opportunities necessary for you to actually improve yourself out of this bad situation. On their side of the debate, when this universal perspective of development doesn't exist, what happens is that people will just have to put up with their situation, right? Poor people will just have to say, okay, even if the situation is not good, even if I'm only paid minimum wage, for example, even if I have to go outside every day and pick up trash, if I have to go outside and sell cakes and whatnot, it's okay anyway. We're still getting rice, for example. We think that this is bad in their side of debate, right? Because then you're still going to struggle. But your outcome is just that stability that is mediocre. We think that on our side of debate, when we actually struggle, even if you struggle, even if you fail, for example, you can still learn from your mistakes. You can still move up from it, right? You can have something to know about it. And we think that in our side of debate, when the development is such that that they push you to actually always improve the kind of opportunities you face, it will be much better because what lies at the end of the road is much better, right? The success from getting a better paid job, for example, because you are now educated, is a much better situation compared to their side of debate. But okay, let's try to say because they are so tunnel vision and individual, let's try to widen this debate, right? Let's try to widen this debate to other actors. For example, let's try developing countries. Let's say that okay, harm that happened is maybe that they are greedy in their development. Let's say that the developing countries, when they are trying to enrich themselves, they overwork their workers and whatnot. We think that at the end of the day, you can't really blame them for wanting to develop, right? Because that is born out of desperation of wanting to improve their economic situation. That is when they have been so exploited in the past, for example, it is only understandable that you want to change the way you are living. That is okay. We think that this is okay. But understand that development in itself in the current status quo is always self-correcting, right? Okay, maybe right now there are greedy people. Maybe right now the policies is not that great. But understand that people will always strive to always present you with a choice, or the very least present you with a check and balance that put up the least amount of damage possible, right? When the environment damage happen, for example, people will feel the need to, let's have green technology. That in itself is a good development. We think that at the very least, even if harm happen, society always try, or at the very least always try to self-correct themselves. At the very least, that's how we mitigate the harm. And we think that when people have learned from their mistake, it's unlikely that you will repeat that kind of mistake, right? We think it is much better in the long term. But okay, we think that on the side, when people have no incentivization to develop, for example, they want to just remain stagnant, we think that it is worse, because again, when they don't know what the problem is, when they do not know what kind of things they should be improved upon, there will actually be no steps for you to progress, right? You will just have to say, okay, we're gonna just be okay with this kind of situation. But understand, then when you know there is barriers, when you know that are damage, when you know that there are harms, you will always try to find policies that could improve the situation. And that is why at the end of the day, we think that the urgency and debate does not actually happen, and at the very least, even if it happens, it's still going to be okay anyway, because the narrative is always self-correcting. There are people making changes, and that is why we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to continue the case of affirmative for calling upon Deputy Prime Minister. Floor is yours. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
I'm okay, gonna set up my timer real quick. Okay, I'm going to begin my speech now. In 3, in 3, 2, 1. Panels, it seems that side opposition's entire case seems to be coming in the form of a utopian world where every harm can be negated because people are becoming more aware and things like mental health is progressing. But we believe this is a very toxic positivist view on this case because it only harms the most vulnerable actors of this debate. And they say that the status quo is developing, and yet there are simply things that cannot be changed as easily, such as things like structural oppression and so on and so forth, which I will elaborate furthermore on in my substantive speech. But they also talk to you about how the concept of development is wrongly perceived both in the status quo and on our side. But the problem is, panels, is that when such a simple idea is upheld as a universal belief, what happens is that it means that it comes with many stereotypes and over-glorifications that will shift it into the harmful concept that it can be today. Moreover, this proliferation is something that has existed for a long time and has shifted into something stereotypical and generalized, which is why we believe that development is not something that is inherently good. But also when we talk about structural problems and views about choice and so on and so forth, when they say that, for example, if you're trapped in poverty, you should try your best to develop your case. However, it is important to note that in which the case of poverty itself, there are very many structural root causes and variables that exist in the system itself. Therefore, you cannot simply say that just by quote unquote improving yourself and pushing harder and working harder, you can somehow change the way you are living right now. Notice that we've explained how the capitalism is proliferating. Just knowing your mistake and working harder is not enough for you to tackle the problem that exists within your condition that hampers your entire community, for example. They also bring about how you can always have choices when in reality, some people do not even have the choice for them do not even have the luxury for them to make choices at all, right? And this pushes them towards a narrative that you have to deal with improving your own condition, and it is completely dismissive to the real world that we are living in today, right? This is why we believe that their entire case seems to be very flowery and very generalized, and we don't see how exactly their benefits can entirely fly. But moving on into my substantive case, where I am going to be explaining how development can be unproportionate, and secondly, how it harms structural oppression. But how exactly do we think that development can be unproportionate? So to say that all development is objectively and inherently good is a very generalized and utopian outlook towards the world that assumes just because something looks good and shiny on the surface that it must only bring benefits, right? It must only bring fulfillment and betterment in some way. But the problem here is that this kind of one-dimensional view that side opposition wants to glorify and romanticize so much on their side, notice that this is a very surface level and unnuanced take, because the reality of the world is anything but. What this means is that when there is development being achieved by one actor, it does not concede that this kind of development is going to cater to another. What this means is that oftentimes it even leads to scenarios where the development of one actor, for example, relies on the stagnant suffering of another. What does this look like? Firstly, my first speaker has already explained to you very holistically how this looks like on an individual scale, where people have these kinds of pressures or unrealistic standards or hustle culture and so on and so forth. But if we look at it from a more communal scale, it looks like underpaid labor workers that have to work full shifts and are barely able to bring food on the table or provide for their families. Meanwhile, the big corporate workers get to bring in more and more money into their pockets for the sake of their own development, right? It looks like major brands like Nestle exploiting millions of gallons from the water supply of secluded or smaller communities, for example. Meanwhile, their own profit continues to skyrocket, and it only expands their marketing and brand development even more. Or how, let's say, Amazon's own development comes at the price of similarly exploiting and overworking their own employees. Or how, let's say, on a much more macro scale, this looks like how capitalism itself and the free market seems to look as if it brings economic developments that gets glorified in the status quo, and yet even if it seems as something that betters one's nation and its citizens' economic condition, but it doesn't actually go hand in hand with the development of social issues that happen as a result of it, right? Like structural oppression, underpaid workers, labor rights issues, or hustle culture itself, and so on and so forth. But why is this important and relevant to the debate? Because this kind of development is often over-glorified, and the people who end out coming out as the race winners are put on this kind of pedestal exactly to overshadow all the harms that in many cases can actually come out of this development in the very first place, right? So if we simply always continue to push for this development and say that it is good, it is inherently going to make things better some way or another, just simply for the sake of development, then we are giving it far too much credit that it deserves, and we are ignoring how development can be very unproportionate, in which it only benefits one community or one actor, while it does not cater whatsoever to another. It is even more harmful in our capitalistic and success-focused society today, where hustle culture is so normalized, and that individuals are baited by this idea of developing their own condition, even at the expense of other things like their own free time, recreation, or even their own mental health. But furthermore, on how it can also harm structural oppression, the problem here is that these kinds of issues exist on both sides, right? Where there are these kinds of systemic root causes that exist regardless, right? But the difference is that when there is this kind of universal belief or this kind of universal perspective that development is an inherent good, it means that three things are happening. Firstly, the people who are already in the rich capitalistic part of society, and these individuals and entities that are already stricken with greed, there will only be a lesser incentive on their side to actually care about further oppressing the lower class, because at the end of the day, all the development they make is good for themselves, right? Or secondly, it's also going to put vulnerable people from the lower class in this kind of baiting cycle, where they're led to believe that if they just work hard enough, or they keep chasing development, because all development is good at the end of the day, right? According to side opposition, it is going to drastically improve their lives by some point at the end of the day, right? But the thing is, this is a very unrealistic standard and pressure that exists, and it only serves to harm people who come from marginalized groups that are systemically oppressed, right? Because it's only going to do things like shift the focus from the actual root issues, and is going to ignore the systemic variables that actually hamper them from oftentimes from actually achieving this kind of development, right? Because there are things like generational poverty, where it is simply because of this kind of faulty system, it is just simply too hard for people to actually be able to get out of this kind of harmful chain, right? But the other problem that we see existing on side opposition is that they seem to set development as this parameter of gaining fulfillment, right? But we question them then, what happens when you lead someone to believe that you can only gain fulfillment from reaching this development in the very first place? What is going to happen when this development doesn't actually come, right? Like what is the analysis of their worst case scenario where this kind of standards and this kind of stereotypes that impact people in our society today is only going to bring more harm than good to these people in the very end of the day, right? This is why this is the case that we are very proud to propose for side government.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to continue the case of negative theme, calling upon Deputy Leader of Position, floor is yours. You're here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, so I think my internet has been like experiencing some troubles for the past few speakers. So because I won't be looking at chat while I'm doing my speech, please do like interject like my speech from the panels if I ever like get disconnected. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we think that the team in yellow has won this debate already, because exactly that the team government has been contradicting themselves over and over and over again, right? And 2, that they have never given you correct explanation, and then 3, that they have always given you like a half stance in the beginning, that they want development but not to be toxic. You're still wanting development anyway. We already said since my LO that that the government should be fighting for no development at all, and why it's better on their side of the case. They never explained it to you. And then one question I pose to the government: if they hate systemic oppression so much, I wonder what could change that. It starts with a D, and it's not my dick, it's development panels. So I'm just going to address the government's side one by one, right? And then I'm going to give like one substantive, right? First of all, I'm going to negate all their harm by saying that all the benefit that exists under their side will always exist under ours, right? Because at the end of the day, they are still fighting for the very development that we're actually fighting for. They never gave you an explanation of what narrative they actually want to push to society later on, and they never even explained to you how it's going to mechanize, right? At the end of the day, they never gave you an alternate world of what this world without narrative, without this narrative looks like. Right? Then they question us about the importance of success. How are they going to question us about the importance of success when the vulnerable actors on their side are actually like suffering right now, right? The importance of success is that those vulnerable actors get higher. The importance of success is that we negate time. The importance of success is that we become a better human being in and out. We fulfill our basic needs, we fulfill our very lives in the first place, right? And then their whole argument lies upon the fact that they are dismissive of my first LO, which says that check and balances of success already exist. Why? Because failure and success is inherently variable to anyone. This is inherent to our side of the case. There's 2 types of success, right? Success that is like society forces upon you, and success that is like that happens because of your personal success, right? But we say that so when the successes turn into like what they talk about, how we're not paying enough people well, how we're not even like how we're like disenfranchising people. We say that success eventually is going to turn into failure, right? That means that if you're going to disenfranchise people, if you're killing people, that means that you already failed to bring the most amount of success, and that can only happen under a variable side of success, right? We say that what happens under our side of the case is that success will be moved, the parameter of success will be moved to, okay, I can get the most rich, or okay, I can help the most poor. And this is likely to happen because exactly there's a lot of social movements right now in our side of the case that reinforces what is the correct type of success, right? At the end of the day, we say it's very likely for that to happen. Second about that, they talk about how crying, we don't want people to suffer, we don't want people to cry, mental health, blah, 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 blah. This is exactly a contradiction from the government side of the case. They talk about that they don't want a non-toxic narrative, but in their side of the case, they specifically just shove what is happening, or the crying and the mental failure that is happening under the rug. Why? Because exactly humans are going to fail at the end of the day. They need to defend why. They need to defend why that doesn't happen on their side of the house, right? And it's going to be much worse on their side of the house because they're only advocating for personal goal panels, and personal goal means personal failure. In our side of the case, it's not only personal failure, because as a personal because exactly that they talk about that there's a lot of like societal failure also that society imposes upon you. So when failure happens on our side of the case, you can say, oh, I didn't expect society's expectations on me, so I'm just going to be okay. Why? Because exactly there's no personal incentive or there's no personal benefit to you only, right? They're always going to like attack you in the very corner. It's going to be much more worse depression on their side of the house, and they're going and people are going to be much more sadder on their side of the house. And then third about they talk about like communities and like and like structural poor and whatnot. We say that this is again contradictory, because why? Because exactly these are the only narrative right now that is fighting for these poor people to go up into the ladder of success is exactly the one that team opposition is fighting for, right? The narrative that okay, you can succeed anyway. Okay, you can succeed. Even if like there are these societal pressures among you, like people cannot like go out of their way to harm. People go out of their way to harm you. Exactly like structure. What happens on their side of the case is nothing. Exactly, they never give you a counter proposal on how their side of the house is going to be better for these poor people when this mechanism is going to be out, right? We say that even if at the end of the day that the poor people are not going to succeed and they fail at the end of the day, it's going to be okay, because at least they have the knowledge and they have the knowledge to become better. And at least if they cannot do that in their life, then they can teach their children what they know about the world and why it's going to be better, and why they can better be like go up in the success ladder, right? Even if success looks like hustle culture in our side of the case, exactly, it's okay, right? We say that people that hustle culture is just people trying to get a better fulfillment in life. People getting like a better wage and etc. We say that it's going to be okay because exactly they want to just live. They don't want to just suffer and be stagnant time and time again, right? But now I'm going to bring a substantive about like the stability versus instability that is happening, right? Stability that the government actually needs to prove in the first place, and this instability that we're fighting for. The natural law of the universe panels is that everything will gravitate towards chaos for stability and patterns to unravel naturally. Like meaning like everyone will like face some sort of harm. Everyone will face some sort of challenge at the end of the day. But humans will always, on our side of the house, want a certain degree of control and order. Thus, life is going to go through like cycles of order and disorder, stability and instability. Humans cannot keep order and stability ever. Humans cannot be stagnant under any side of the house, right? It is impossible. Because why? Because if you're stagnant, if you're poor and you're stagnant, you don't want to do anything. Your daily life is just going to be smoking cigarettes on the porch, right? Your daily life is not going to like want a better fulfillment for your family and whatnot. And exactly why? Because let's say like the picturization of I'm going to give is like in the college, because even if your IPK goes down, even if you get a bad docent at the end of the day, we're going to say it's okay because under our side of the house, we give the motivation for them to do so, to do better later on, right? And then this is exactly why it's going to be better, because more complex problems arise along the way, right? It's not just going to be the same amount of like problem. You're going, for example, you're going to go to like a quarterfinal where you're beating like someone that is lower skill than you, to go to grand finals where someone is beating, where someone is like on the same level and you. Problems are going to happen and on a much larger scale at every end of the stage, and we say it's going to be better on our side of the house because as time goes on, we slowly get loose and get exert less supervision and attention to certain matters like your grades, and we have the knowledge to how to provide and how to beat all those harms. That is exactly why team in yellow should win. Thank you.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to close the case of government team, we're calling upon government with floor is yours. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, I'm going to set on my timer a little bit. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, this is not the debate where you both sides, so it should make a nice. We think this is a debate where you should compare both sides and different what happened in scenario of both sides, right? Even Gov is still actually, even opposition is actually, continuously asking us what is the difference under our side of the house. We think that my first already been clear to you as to how then these motivations are just proliferating under society right now is actually being forced, right, by society. We think that by the end of the day, they never told you as to how this is not the status quo, because until now, you still hear people telling you that if you are 20 and you're not getting married, then you're not well developed enough, right? They never explain to you as to how this suddenly the status quo under their side of the house is that utopic, right? Is that ideal that people are stagnant and people is actually that very well, right? People are not going to prone to failures and so on and so forth. They never actually defend that in the very first place, right? We do not say that we don't want development, right? Because we already also differentiate to you that proliferation is actually different, right? Between the one that is universally perceived and the one that is individually targeted or game, right? If opposition want to stand under the premise that, okay, we don't have motivations and motivation only exists under their side of the house, they have to eventually defend this status quo in the very first place. Of first, why all spectrum of society are inherently privileged enough, but secondly, why people are rational to help campaign and whatnot, right? Because notice, my first have been telling to you as to how this proliferation of universally perceived motivation is actually overshadowing this kind of campaign and this kind of check and balance that they propose since the beginning of this debate. But moreover, there is also inconsistency coming from their side of the house where they say that, okay, society is progressing, but funnily enough, they also told you that they concede there are still things that you couldn't change, like unprivileged people, structural poverty, which clearly my second speaker have also catered to this problem, and they never actually tell you until the end of this debate, right? So before coming to my clash, one individual rebuttals, right? Opposition claims as to how they have check and balance system in a progressing status quo where people will somehow not going to be stressed or pressured by the standard of this development, right? Or not going to be disappointed in themselves when they fail or actually get this development, right? We think that, okay, first, in a very first place, mental health is not that easily accessible and it's not actually accessible to everyone, right? We think that by the end of the day, even if, okay, there's campaign on there's this check and balance, because of this proliferation of this universally perceived motivation happened since a long time ago, we do not overshadow, right? That is to say there are a lot of people that is still feeling the burden that this is not society, this is not what the society want, this is not ideal enough for me to live in the society, right? Even if it is that progressive, we still that why then there's still so many young people, being burned out and being pushed into hustle culture, right? For example, we do not think that their stance since the beginning of this debate is actually that that consistent, right? Because till the end of this debate, they still have burden left to be answered. But coming to my clash, two things. Firstly, which one is better between universal perceived or individual targeted motivation? But secondly, right, how then this manifests from both sides scenario? Coming to my first clashes, three sub clashes I'm going to bring. Firstly, opposition argue to you as to how universally perceived motivation create innovation for people that, yeah, we understand it actually proliferate as to how you told other people to do, so you told other people to get better and whatnot, right? Two response. Firstly, we never say that it did not anyway, right? My first clearly speaks to as to how stereotype coming from society as to how much development you made is actually determined by how many salary you learn, how high your GPA is when you're graduating, and yes, that comes from society that influence people to actually do something or innovate, right? But secondly, opposition argue as to how this will innovate people. We think this is the big chunks of argument coming from opposition, right? And yes, it push people to do, but to what extent, right? We think that innovation is important as long as it is worth it and does not harm yourself. Meaning, yes, under our side, we do still have innovation based on what you want to achieve your passion, what jobs you want, and a more individual target, right? We think it's clearly different, right? Setting individual target, then getting into the mainstream as to how people put stereotype on you. Opposition themselves concede that development is inevitable because yes, we say that in the end, these people also have to survive. That is to say, innovation will also still exist under our side of the house because people are afraid of the thought that they're living under poverty, for example, afraid of the thought that they couldn't survive one day. That is to say, they couldn't just say, oh, innovation will not be exist under our side of the house. But second subclass, right? Opposition argue to you as to how people are putting more check and balance and there's campaign and whatnot, right? Several responses. First, even if there is, then you have to put weighing, right, as to how much this check and balance exists and how many stereotypes the society have given to you. We think, yes, we do have campaign of mental health, for example, and whatnot, but we do also have a part of society, right, that is still forcing you to get married at 20, for example, to get proper job at 20, to be, stable when you are already 24, for example. That this universally perceived motivation overshadow the campaign that exists within society, not to mention how it is exploiting more marginalized people and unprivileged communities, right? That is why there are still people who say that you're living at your home and actually of the day, they are still the part that is being overshadowed by this narrative, right? We do not think that opposition has ever countered to you as to how this proliferation or this stereotype is not the status quo, right? But lastly, on the comparison itself, right? Opposition can no longer argue that we do not want development because we consider that yes, development will still exist, but it's different. Even in the worst case, where people are being less innovative, we bet the bullet that this less of innovation exists both sides by the end of the day, right? Notice how this scenario under opposition side will also cause this motivation, the tiring feelings that you're trying to fight from poverty, that you're trying to fight from things you cannot change, because opposition also consider that there are a lot of things that is you cannot change in the status quo. We say that it's worse under opposition side of the house because you're actually betting on these kind of things that will push you to eventually self-blame, right? At least under our side of the house, it is going to be better because in the end, even if you go down, even if you feel less innovation, for example, you are going to heal for yourself. You're going to feel a self of fulfillment that you're not trying to actually appeal society stereotypes by the end of the day, right? We do not think opposition have ever counter to this kind of argument. But lastly, right, how this manifests in both sides scenario, two things. Firstly, under government, we propose several things. First, we know the nature of human is actually prone to failure, right? So we comply that motivation should be based on individual. When opposition argue to you about failure, we think it's going to be much more harmful under the side of the house as to how this failure is pushed by the narrative of public telling you that, oh, you're not enough and whatnot. And we think that this kind of motivations, but under the side of the house, in the end is going to be bad, right? But secondly, we never tell failure that it's not going to happen under our side, right? It is dismissive for their second to tell that we consider failure never happened. But why this better under our side, right? We clearly told you that even when you fail, this grand final, for example, you do not have then to be pushed by the narrative that people telling you should be a debater when you go to university, right? But thirdly, opposition told you that people are not going to attack you, people are not going to be that evil, right? But they are completely dismissed the idea as to how the proliferation of this, universally perceived motivation overshadow those check and balance, right? We think that the nature of people is not always to be kind, right? By the end of the day, they cannot stand on that utopic stance since until the end of this debate. But fourthly, we comply to things that you could not change, right? We think that my second speaker has been very vocal to you as to how this our side comply to structural issues like poor people, for example, poverty, people living under, the condition of things that you can change. At least under our side of the house, this action, for example, living in poverty, they could just focus on their individual motivation as to how I could give my wife and child a food, for example, not onto the, not onto the motivation that people told you, oh, you have to be rich, you have a proper house, and so on and so forth, because it's clearly this structural issue. It is the thing that you cannot change by the end of the day. have told you as to how they're going to be more stability. We think that this is utopic because this can only happen when people are not being content with their current condition in the very first place, because people always try to pursue something, right? Even under their set, it's going to be worse because they're trying to pursue something at the expense of other people pajajaran in this debate.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to close the case of negative theme, we're calling upon opposition whip. Floor is yours. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. Right. I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we too regret the implications of the current views of development, but that's because society has a false perception of what development is. And even within that, it's still a very black and white take made by the government. And I will explain further why that statement in itself is not completely true. But we will explain what is development fundamentally and why is it good. Because I want to question the government's case. If they don't like the universal understanding of development is always good, because they say basically society's notion of development is messed up, not ready to comprehend what development fully means, what is their solution? Just how is it that they will unroot systemic problems or toxic hustle culture if not through development? Because we think it is very much unfair for them to try to differentiate their definition of personal growth and development as something different from our definition of development. Because development is not only always toxic. We have mentioned to you that development can mean bad things, can mean losing, can mean failing, even on our side. So we really is very confused. Why are they so adamant about our side being utopian, being idealistic, when we have clearly told you and proven to you that essentially what development is just the opposite of stagnancy. That is what we don't get. And that is why we really don't get. Why is it that opposition wants the same thing as us, but also tries to oppose the things that we tell them will work in order to achieve our goal, that is to make a better society. And so on their first main notion is that society's perspective of measuring development is solely from achievements, because they mentioned that when something is universally accepted, it can fester to stigmas and etc., etc. We think that this is a very baseless accusation because, one, it is a very big claim. They have to prove to you just how it is that this big claim can manifest into daily situations, because we think it's much more nuanced than that, as my first and second speaker has mentioned. And so, first of all, not everyone think that. Right? Society isn't black or white. Many people and societies has come to the notion that development isn't inherently measured by success. Let's say 50 years ago, parents might only tell their children that they will succeed if they get straight A's. But now many parents are okay with their children doing subpar or even failing, because they know that grades aren't the only measurements of success, because they know that development is only measured by success. So what does this tell you, ladies and gentlemen? On our side of the house, if we upkeep the notion that all development is inherently good, be it failing or succeeding, we will always come to realize that development isn't always positive, because what we uphold is the development itself, not the result. So our side will eventually move society to a much better understanding of development. And now let's talk about whatever it is that they mentioned will motivate people on their side. That is a personal motivation. First of all, they told you that people will try to move along their lives based on their personal goals and only what's good for them, and not based on what society puts on them. But we think that it's just very unlikely to happen, because human beings are inherently social beings. So what they see from society is what they will internalize. And so they would have to defend just how effective is it that these people can only make decisions based on their internal self when they live in a society with other people. Moving to my clashes, I have two clashes. First of all, it's the impact on society, and second clash is impact on individuals. First clash, impact on society. Government mentioned some things like some developments rely on stagnant suffering in others. And so, as the second speaker has mentioned, if they hate structural barriers so much, just what is it can change it. Development, we seriously don't understand why they would want to impede our development, but somehow champion their development when it's clearly the same thing, ladies and gentlemen. So don't let the government fool you by letting you believe that they are proposing something different, because they are not. They're not even proposing anything, ladies and gentlemen. So on our side, when we see a structural barrier, obviously we won't just tell poor people work harder, because we've already mentioned to you that it is much more complex than that. So, okay, let's say there are structural barriers like in education, how minority quota to education is small. But we think it's good because now that many people knows that there is a problem, they can pressure, they can rally, they can lobby for better policies like Asian students going to affirmative actions or pressuring Harvard to accept more Asian students, or government realizing that poor people have problems. This is development. This is development. And so when they say that message of success and goal is drowning out mental health and campaign that validates struggle, we think it's very much not true, because at the end of the day, we have conceded. The moment that we have conceded that all development is good, we don't really differentiate losing from winning. What we differentiate is not being stagnant, realizing what is wrong with you. Is it something that you can control? Is it something that you can't? Is it something that's structural? Is it something from society or something from you? And so even right now in social media, we already have check and balances. Social media, what campaign that saturate platforms are the ones that recognize the harm of burnout, like infographics on how to balance your life and work. And so even the check and balance on our side already concedes that there are toxic narratives in the current status quo of accepting development. So we think that the harm is very much negated, because as people accept what development really is by thinking that all development is inherently good, they will get better at differentiating just what development is, and that it shouldn't be dictated just on winning. And so moving on to my next clash is the impacts on individual. Government mentioned that the nature of human being is born to failure, and so when it's based on achievements, blah blah blah, it's bad, so it should be on self-development. We have already completely rebutted to you. And they mentioned that when a value is universally accepted, it will morph into many stereotypes. We told you that this is a very big claim, and we don't want you to just simply buy this if they don't want to provide you very clear explanations on how this will play out. And government mentioned some things that are like, if you are poor, you can't just work harder or do better, and etc., etc. Because we have never claimed that whatever it is the government mentioned as development is actually this definition of development. Even within the if there are people who uphold toxic culture, at the end of the day, not everyone thinks in a very black and white manner. And we don't understand just how it is when a value is universally accepted. It must mean that people will stigmatize it. It must mean that people will misinterpret it. No, we think that actually people will get into more discussions on what they think is right, on what they think is important, and they will come to the understanding that development is not defined by winning. It's not defined by the things, by working hard. Oh, you're poor, so you got to work harder. No, development is realizing what is wrong with you. Why are you poor? Is it your fault or the government fault? Who is failing your life at this point? That is development, because that makes you realize, that makes you think, that makes you voice out your concerns, that forces people to think the same, and ignites discussions, and it brings changes, ladies and gentlemen. So we think at the end of the day, even if development isn't inherently, even if development is deemed as something bad, it makes us learn from it. Because life isn't stagnant, ladies and gentlemen. Life will always throw problems at you. Change is inevitable. And development is a tool for you to learn from those changes. And we have proven to you that the government simply dismisses our development with their development, although we are really proposing the same thing. That is why we're so happy to oppose.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to summarize and conclude the case of opposition reply whenever you're ready. Here.
Okay, audible, right? Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, again, we think it's so ridiculous that the government is so hell-bent with their idea of development, that their idea of development basically caters to us, right? We think that the debate should actually be about development versus stagnation. But what happened here in this debate is that they were just catering to our case, right? We think that at the end of the day, whatever they try to propose to you is already benefited, is already countered, and is already proven to you that those kind of things that they try to propose is already existed in our side of the debate. So firstly, let's question what this debate is actually about, right? We think that there should be two main points in this debate. Firstly, what kind of things that do we have to challenge? Right? Is it development or is it stagnation? And secondly, is development actually harmful? And I'm going to explain to you why our team actually won these two clashes. Firstly, about the characterization of this universal perspective of development, right? Understand that what this debate should be about is again about whether we should defend this development or should we defend the stability in itself. We think that in our such debate, we already characterized to you a few ways this universal perspective manifests, right? It manifests maybe it manifests in either hassle culture or some kind of moderate social perspective where people just appreciate the process that you go through when you're going through these achievements in the first place. We think that in our side of debate we already covered these two narratives, and we already proven to you why even at the end of the day, if these two narratives exist, it's still going to benefit the actors in this debate, right? On their side of the debate, there is no explanation about what it is that makes their individual development so different from our general view of development in the first place. And even so, even if they manage to characterize to you why individual development is so different, we think that they're still losing on the basis that their case is still going to be able to be achieved in our side of debate. What they should have bring to you is about why they should champion stability. They even got their case so incorrect from the start of the debate. But okay, how do we prove to you how do our side of debate prove to you that development is not actually harmful and is actually benefiting these people, right? We already given to you a few examples firstly about how development actually incentivizes you to have social mobilization. And even if you fail, we think that the check and balances and the things you gain from this failure is still going to benefit you in some way, right? How do we manifest this? We say this by saying that when development is this universal perspective, people pushes you to be the better version of yourself. Like they're not telling you to be millionaires, they're not telling you to be Elon Musk. They're telling you to at least go to college so that you can educate yourself. Go through some series of improvements so that you are not stuck in this poverty, so that you are not stuck in this structural barriers that exist, right? We think that when people are actually pushed to open new doors, they actually would be able to move away from the harms that exist from these structural barriers, right? We also explained to you that when these people actually realize there's problems, there are actually more people who are incentivized to go to a progressive future. For example, we explained to you in our third that when there are this systemic barrier that the government is so worried about, development is actually what we need. Because the moment people realize that this is the kind of situation where we cannot be stagnant, people will be pushed to actually provide solution. For example, again, Harvard students, Asian students going to affirmative actions, government helping poor people because they cannot go to education by providing scholarships and whatnot. That is development. That is the kind of situation that improving status quo that is actually very beneficial, right? But on their side of debate, they try to tell you, but it's gonna be bad because you're gonna fail. You're gonna be stuck in this toxic competition. But we think at the end of the day, it's not like the kind of toxic condemnation of Taylor does even exist in our status quo, right? Understand that there are already people championing that effort is good, effort is okay. Even if you fail, you have tried your best. We think that at the end of the day, that is still the kind of media campaign that exists in the status quo, right? That is what saturates our current status quo. But even if you fail, we think that it's still better because then you actually have the skills, because you then are educated, and because then you actually are prepared to face the struggles in your life that that you cannot change. So at the end of the day, we think that we win on the basis that in our side of debate, individuals are skilled, individuals have social mobilization, and individuals have choices. And that is why we think that we have won this debate. Thank you.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to conclude the analysis coming from government team and also summarize the debate as a whole, we're calling upon government reply. Floor is yours. Here.
Wait, just to clarify, am I still audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Thank you. Okay, currently setting my timer. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It seems like side opposition has failed to fully understand today's motion, and that is why they are losing this debate. The focus of case under opposition is not about against the stagnancy in society or no development at all, but instead we have to talk about the narrative that the development is inherently good. I think the matrix of universal perception and the inherently good part is the one that should be judged and weighed, and not whether or not development should exist in the world, because I think everyone has a room of agreement that development is needed, but it's not the focus of it. Let's focus on the universal perception and regarding, right? We do not defend a world where there's no development, and we do not dwell on a world where everybody's literally Mark Zuckerberg or Mariana. We think that is so utopic. So one important thing to note on this debate is that how to not being dismissive towards the current world that we're living in right now, right? Because notice how the characterization of universally based perception, they haven't bitten the bullet to look at how the inherent narrative of it is going to bring harm. They haven't proven to you on how, number one, people can be satisfied with their current condition just like that and be content and stable, which will never happen once the development is inherent for you in order to be considered as functioning part of the society. But number two, how people that are being harmed by structural things will not self-blame or led to think that their condition is their fault and it's their job to get out of it, right? So let's take a look at this debate through two metrics. Firstly, very shortly, let's take a look on the lens of the idea of inherent development itself, right? Because we're the only team that can proven to you when such a simple idea is being upheld as a universal belief, it means that it comes with many stereotypes and over glorification that will shift it into the harmful concept it can be today. So that is the proliferation is something that has existed for a long time and has shifted into something stereotypical and generalized, right? I think their case is playing in a very best case scenario in which everyone is going to agree. Is going to agree just like that it will not bring harm at all, right? But secondly, on the lens of development and protection of self-improvement, right? We think that yes, development for these people who are, for example, like marginalized is good, but their suffering in the very first place exists for the development of another. That is exactly why development of others are a development or yes, those structural systems can still in structural system itself can still people in the poverty, but at least they will never be catered into self-blame. And also we question, just because all people think that development is good, just like under their side of the house, how will they eradicate the kind of systemic oppression just like that? And their whole context that they bring is very much utopic and flowery, and it's so problematic in this shift towards the contextualization that it would have provide, right? So if they want to attack our case where systemic oppression does not get any better, then they also need to defend their own case and tell us why exactly the scenario is any different on their side. Because our second speaker has already very conceded that yes, systemic flaws exist on both sides, but both notice that unlike side opposition, we show you exactly how these systemic issues exist exactly because of certain development that happens to other actors. Yet, comparatively on our side, notice that at least we can still give them an escape from these harmful standardized definition of development when they're prone to self-blaming and being led to falsely believe that they can change their own condition, at least on our side of the house. Also notice how on their side of the house, they have been defending the exact opposite of this, where they want to push lower class people to keep working harder in this endless cycle, even though they don't have the same opportunities and choices to begin with. We never said we don't want development, but it is not inherently good. At least in our side of the house, we can still better protect the vulnerable actors on like side opposition, right? They talk about perception of development. The way that they talk about the perception of development itself is also the one that is false, because notice how they don't realize that this is exactly what their side is against for, because the false perception itself comes from the narrative of development being inherently good. This is why their lack of awareness towards the current circumstances is inherently harmful to their case. Just because people believe development is inherently good on their side, how does it solve the issues that they think only exist on our side? Vote for Prajajaran.
Thank you for the fine speech. That ends the round of Novice Grand Final in IVED 2022. Congratulations everyone for making it this far and also for finishing this round. As for the adjudicators, or are we going to deliberate in this Zoom?